Welcome to the Movie Vault. I'm Ben.
And I'm Zach.
And today, we are finishing up our Terrence Malick series, which is crazy to say because we've spent 3 or 4 months.
3
months doing 5 movies, which seems really appropriate, actually, for Terrence Malick. It seems like he would appreciate that we spent so much time thinking about his movies, letting them really sitting with them. And the last one we're doing here is maybe, if it's not his most well-known, it's his second most well-known. It's also the one he won the Palme d'Or for. And this is The Tree of Life, which Wikipedia described as an epic experimental coming-of-age drama, which I think encapsulates parts of the movie, but doesn't really cover the entire point of the movie. In some ways, it's a coming-of-age story. I see where they're coming from, but in other ways, it's not. This movie was made on a $32 million budget and made $60 million, showing that
he can
Malick
make money.
Can make money when he has something that is very. I think this film had kind of a moment, and it's not just like the fact that it was in Cannes. I think this maybe lent itself really well to being in IMAX was one of the things. But I also could see this being a movie that some people talk about, and then people got talked into going, and then half the people were like, this is way too over my head. It's too artsy. I don't like this. And the other half of the people were just like, whoa, the cinematography is just so cool.
It's kind of like water and oil, right? You hear a lot about it. Like the mainstream culture hears a lot about this director, Terrence Malick, and then they finally go and see it, and they don't really want it.
Right.
But it won, the Critics Award at Cannes and everything.
Yeah. And it reflects in the Rotten Tomatoes score, too. Not that we give too much credence to Rotten Tomatoes here on the Movie Vault, but sometimes it is interesting to look. So 85% of critics liked the movie, or at least rated it good, and then 60% of the audience.
Yeah.
So usually you sometimes see that you can just look at Rotten Tomatoes to see this is a movie that leans more towards critics or people who are really fans of filmmakers and auteur theory and things like that.
Yeah.
And then the general public, anything that has a niche interest. For a while I was really into roller coasters. So people who are really into roller coasters, they call the rest of the population who's not as into roller coasters as them the GP, this general public. So they use this terminology because they appreciate the certain elements of roller coasters that somebody who just likes going to ride roller coasters, and they love all the same roller coasters as these people who are roller coaster nerds, but they don't understand the terminology or airtime or ejector airtime or these things the amount of time that you're out of the seat versus when you're in the seat, these really minute details, and they don't appreciate they want to go for Valraven. They want to go for one that just hangs you over the edge and drops you, and other that would be a GP favorite that the critics, the roller coaster nerds, they don't like that much.
Yeah. Whereas
they would like a rough wooden roller coaster that really threw you out of your seat, but a lot of the general public would be like, this is too rough, and why do we even have wooden roller coasters anymore? Mm-hmm. So this is a great comparison to Terrence Malick as the most rough wooden roller coaster that's also really intense. So maybe think The Beast at Kings Island.
Yeah. That's
Terrence Malick, because he meanders sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Why is there a second lift hill? And why is, all this stuff with The Beast that doesn't, it's what were they doing? It's just it doesn't always feel like it has a sense of purpose. But at the end of the ride,
I'm not sure if I thought any of those things, but continue.
At the end of the ride, you're always thrilled because it's got that double helix at the end, which is always amazing. Anyway, I definitely stretched this analogy.
You
way
made a
too
good
far.
point. And I think to get back on Rotten Tomatoes score, it is low for this film. It definitely deserves a higher score on the audience side, but the audience doesn't the GP doesn't like this.
Yeah.
And That's okay. I only use Rotten Tomatoes scores to know if a movie is bad. I never use it to know if a movie is good, right?
That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, because if a movie's bad, it's gonna have a low Rotten Tomato score. If a
Rarely-
movie's good, it's a maybe.
Rarely does a movie like that misunderstood that it has a bad Rotten Tomatoes score, and I would like argue that it's actually good.
Yeah,
I'm sure it happens.
yeah,
But it's rare. It's very rare.
yeah. So just use it on the negative end, but it's a big. I mean, that's pretty low for how amazing. I gave this 4 stars. How amazing of a film this is. 4 stars is an 80%, and I'm a harsh critic anyway. So it's, and I guess I'm not a GP in the movie world.
No, I don't
would
think
lean
you are.
more. I might lean more to GP than I would to a critic.
Yeah, we maybe both do. To be quite honest, I don't know that I've watched enough of the critically, like the real critically acclaimed stuff to be like I'm fully in that world.
Sure.
And there certainly are films that I would probably come to that certain critics would like that I'd be like, that's just pretentious and I don't like it.
But it's also intentional, right? We sit in this balance between the critic and the GP because it's kind of like becoming a politician where you have to step on a few necks to become that high up in the world.
Right.
And you have to watch a few inappropriate movies to become such a good critic.
Right.
So
that's a good point.
That's where I stand.
And also I think but people love Roger Ebert, but there's drawbacks to being Roger Ebert. Sometimes you stop having fun and you start viewing movies as these like they always have to be these like really profound statements. I'm not even saying Roger Ebert actually. I'm just imagining a critic who you lose the whole reason that you loved films in the first place, which was the wonder. And so like you don't have to just like get to a certain point and be like, I don't like Steven Spielberg anymore, because then you've lost the wonder. Like his movies have wonder. You want to experience those things, but like the Tree of Life also has wonder. It's just a different type of wonder.
Yeah.
And you want to just grow and open yourself to more different types of wonder. Mm-hmm. It's like you don't have to watch the type of wonder that Steven Spielberg makes all the time, but it doesn't mean you have to stop appreciating it.
Yeah. You just got to expand.
Yeah, it's just like food or like any other hobby.
It's a palette.
Yes, exactly.
And I think you're right.
You don't start out liking I can't even think of what's this escargot?
I don't know.
Snail.
I'm not sure.
I've never had escargot, but I imagine if you've never had escargot, you probably don't go and eat it and like it the first time.
No, we were just talking about how we like buffets before this.
Yeah.
So no, that's not our taste. I will say though, this film reminded me a lot of, and this is just a stupid comparison, but Avatar: The Way of Water. Because of the visuals and just kind of sitting in the visuals. Now, here's the thing. We all know that Terrence Malick is a visual storyteller. If you haven't listened to our previous episodes, we go deep into who Malick is, how he makes films, what kind of tropes he uses in his films, and how they've evolved. And obviously the epitome of his visual storytelling is in A Hidden Life. But I would say even more so it's in this. And A Hidden Life comes after this. So he's like, okay, maybe I took it a little bit too far in Tree of Life, and I'm going to hone in a little bit more on the dialogue.
I think this is the penultimate Terrence Malick movie.
Yeah.
I don't know that necessarily it's not my favorite Terrence Malick movie. And it may not be even objectively the best Terrence Malick movie, although I think you could make a strong argument it may be.
I think it's up there. It's so close.
But it is the movie that most describes Malick of what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
It touches on everything. His attentiveness to like every moment of screen time.
Yeah.
And his exploration of nature and he's in this movie he's studying himself. Like we started being like, wait, we talked about Malick. He grew up in Oklahoma and Texas, and he lost a brother who was obsessed with playing guitar. In this movie, the brother dies at a young age, and you're like, and you know, like, what were his parents like? You're like, it starts to be like, oh, is this like a little bit semi-autobiographical? Yeah. Like, this is maybe his most personal piece of art that he's made.
It has to be, because if you think about it, Badlands is kind of out there. right? It's a
It's a
murderous
fairy tale.
rage. Yeah, it is a fairy tale. Days of Heaven is a love triangle, right?
Also has some fairy tale qualities to it,
For sure.
but more
Symbolism.
parable.
Yeah,
I think.
Symbolic, parabolic.
Yeah.
Parabolic. That's more a mathematical term. But then you have Thin Red Line. You know, historical fiction, but
His most
non-fictional.
maybe his most grounded movie.
And then A Hidden Life as well, I would say.
Yeah, Hidden Life is also pretty grounded.
Then you have this film that connects, I would say, a few disparate ideas in such a beautiful way through the visual storytelling that he's developed from Days of Heaven onward. Because I don't think he did it in Badlands as much.
No.
So from Days of Heaven onward, which I still claim that Days of Heaven is my favorite cinematographic experience that I've ever watched in a film. And from then on, he has improved the ways that he tells stories through visuals. There are minutes of scenes in here that are just cosmos, just galaxies and stars and explosions, lava, different smokes. I can't even tell what I'm looking at half the time. It looks like a kaleidoscope. And it's just to show the vastness of space and how the smallest of issues within our own hearts play into that. How does his relationship with his dad play into the galaxy that he's within? How does his relationship with his brother and his love that they have, this love that they have, how does that compare to the rest of the world and nature and life that exists? You know, it's kind of like stepping back and seeing ourselves not as smaller, but as part of a larger story. Because I don't think the point of it, Ben, I don't think the point of it is, oh, here's the cosmos, so what is happening on the ground level is insignificant. That would be your natural conclusion, right? You might think like, oh, let's step back and see, oh, so many billions and trillions of things are happening at once in the universe. That means that our problems really aren't that big. It doesn't matter. We're just a blip. But I don't think that's Malick's point. I think this is the most Malickian film, like you said, because he's saying it's almost more important because we play a role in this larger universe. And obviously, that connection is God. Right. He connects everything with God. You know, they are saying prayers throughout the film. They raise their kids in the Word, or in prayer at least, and the kid is interacting with God. The kid's name I keep forgetting. Jack. It should be the easiest name to remember.
Yeah, there's Jack and RL.
Yeah, RL, not RJ. RL.
But Jack is the character. That would be the reason it's called a coming of age story, is because Jack is really the central figure in the movie.
Yeah, and and then Sean Penn plays his older counterpart years down the line after RL. Yeah, RL passes away, and we don't find out how he passes away.
Yeah, we have no idea. It's probably left intentionally. Like, is it implied that it's suicide? That was kind of what I was thinking at first, but then I kind of realized that was just where my head naturally went. There was no like.
There is an implication though. His brother committed suicide.
But it seemed like the way people reacted and were really like searching within themselves as to like, were they to blame for what happened? Mm-hmm. It seemed like even if it wasn't suicide, there was an element of waywardness. Like, they let this kid go. They didn't help him. Something happened. Yeah. And you know, maybe it was that he went off to war and he died in battle or something like that. But or maybe he died in a car accident, or maybe, you know, it could be any number of things. But it seemed like there was an element of people blaming themselves. And what I really love about this movie is, you were right. Like, it shows the humans' relationships with God, and it also shows their struggle in their relationship with God. Yeah. So there were a lot of times where people were questioning who God was and questioning his purposes and his goodness. But then there were also equally as many times where truth was spoken. And I remember the sermon it's kind of in the middle of the movie, where he talks about, because a lot of the movie is about facing suffering and hardship and trials. And I forget exactly what the preacher says, but he talks about how in Job, like, he is good by as high of standards as we can give a human. and
Yeah.
yet he still suffers.
Yeah.
And it's if you read the passage in the Bible, it's like very clear. Like Job was considered righteous in God's eyes, and he still allowed him to suffer very intensely and like purposefully, and he allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
So, and then Jack asked this question, like, how can I follow you? I'm probably butchering exactly what he says, but like, how can I follow you when you aren't good, or you're allowing bad things to happen? And that is like a question that is a very large cause for people to struggle with the idea of God, or if they sort of already have an established belief in God, causes them to question him as like, how can God allow suffering? Because the older you get, and Zach and I were kind of having some conversations off the mic, your conversations kind of become, as you grow older, oh, wow, this person I know is going through this thing. Oh, I have this family member, they're sick, or they're struggling with this or that, or, you start to notice these things more and more. And then eventually it becomes personal. It's your own life, your close family member. It's you that is the one who are struggling. And I suppose for some people it starts younger than others. Like some people, it's from the moment they're born, they're struggling, or they notice, and they haven't had as much of a shield around them to block out some of the at least noticing suffering. So whether it happens at a young age or when you're a little bit older, at some point you face, wait, why is this happen? Like, why does this have to happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The preacher had said misfortune befalls the good as well, and that Job was close to the Lord. And he uses this line. He says, are your children and family your security? Just like Job's was, right? It's kind of like, yes, there are great things in life, and eventually bad things will happen. But even to the good, not just to the bad. We often have this pre-made judgment in our head that the good deserve evil, that the good deserve good and the evil deserve evil. And yes, there are Bible verses that similarly say that. But then there are ones that also say the opposite. Not that they don't fit together. It's context specific, right? Right. Good things will happen to good people. Well, we also know that no one is good. So there's a lot of things to look into when it comes to that. But God is the one who gives, and he's the one who takes away. And that's probably one of the biggest themes in this film, is like, there are larger purposes going on. There are reasons that good things happen to seemingly, we use quotation marks around the good people, right?
We're when we walk into it, it's an assumption. When we say good, we're using human terminology essentially for what that means.
But even you could replace it with the faithful.
Yeah.
With those who follow God. And you could say, why do bad things happen to them? God gives them all these promises. He says good things will come in the end for these people, and he will hold them. But it's because a lot of times we don't have eternity stamped on our eyes, and we only see the present. And that's when we focus so much on the suffering and the pain and the things that we do deserve, and we deserve much worse than them. But we focus, we're very tunnel visioned on the effects of sin in our life, and the consequences of Adam's fall, and we forget that there are eternal realities that have yet to come. And I think it's just a lot of these prayers are the gut human reactions that we have to tragedy, and it's beautiful because we can all relate to that, as Christians at least. And of course, it takes thoughtfulness, going to God, being steadfast in prayer, to realize, we need to reframe our theology to understand that our prayer actually isn't asking the right question. But in the end, this film is just showing the gut reaction to question God, just like Job.
Mm-hmm. And another character that I felt like was very important to the movie was Mr. O'Brien.
Yeah.
Who is Jack's father, because he shows a certain way. The movie introduces him like, okay, he's loves his kids, he's a good father. He reads his Bible, he prays at the table, they go to church It's very structured. But as the movie goes on, you start to see his flaws and his hypocrisy and his son. And it's like you're witnessing it as his son is realizing it, right? So this is also a guy who has sort of a chip on his shoulder because, again, he has framed it that if you're good, you should be rewarded. And in his mind, that's with wealth. Now, Zach and I noted that their house is actually like pretty nice. And we were like, why are they ungrateful for this house? Like,
it was beautiful.
I was like, if I owned a house like that,
So
I'd
much
be
natural
like,
light.
so proud of it and like try to take care of it.
Beautiful yard, picnic table.
Yeah. And I was like, what more do you need? But but he knew people in town who was like, oh, I know this guy, he owns half the town, or, you know, there's bigger houses. And I think, you know, he says at the end of the film that he wants to be someone important. So there's like a pride. It's not even just all about the money. It's about recognition and doing something that's impactful. So he sets his mind and takes time away from his family when he's not working to work on like patents and inventions, a lot of which don't come to fruition, don't work out. Eventually he does achieve the success he wants and doesn't make his relationship with his family better. They don't end up moving. And then eventually he loses the job and he's like, I'm a fool. You know, he kind of realizes the error of his ways once he's brought to a low point. And it also, you know, he has other issues. He's very heavy-handed, and you're like, it's good to discipline kids, but it's like, is he doing it in a measured, loving way, or is he doing it out of a sense of perfectionism that he's holding his sons to a standard that they'll never be able to achieve? Like, and he's constantly moving the bar higher up to where they can't reach it. And then he also mistreats his wife a lot. And because she's the representation of grace in the movie, he resents that she is graceful and blames her and feels like she is working against his discipline. Yeah. So they're like the two forces of nature. And of course, since she's graceful, she's she has a hard time standing up for herself. Yeah. Because it's not her natural instinct to be, you know, to be doing that, to be fighting, to be, you know.
One of the first lines in the film is, there are two ways. There's the way of nature and the way of grace. Grace doesn't want to please itself. It is okay being slighted, forgotten, and disliked. And then on the opposite, there is nature that finds a way to be discontent in all things.
And you can really see that in the parents.
Yes.
It's like, actually, it's kind of obvious when you read that quote that what it's talking about once you see what the parents act like.
It's almost like if they had a good marriage and got some marriage counseling, they could have found middle grounds in the oneness in their marriage.
Right.
And probably had a really good balance of nature and grace.
Right.
And we're using Malick's terms, his definitions of nature and grace.
Yeah.
Right, because those terms could be used in much bigger, with much bigger, I don't know, much more.
Yeah,
what word am I thinking of?
I don't know, but I know
in much other in different ways. I'll just say
that's not the only way you could use them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in many ways, it is a coming of age story with Jack starting to question his parents. There's a lot of like scenes of Jack being very impulsive, and like in some ways, this shows up in his relationship with his brother, who he like sort of convinces to do certain things, like not with the intent to hurt him, but with the intent to see whether he can get him to do the things. Like, and that the fact is, his brother's looking at this like, well, I'm showing my brother I trust him. But then at one point he ends up like putting his brother in a position where he shoots a BB gun at his finger, and whether or not he intended to shoot off the BB gun is what happened. And he didn't have to put his brother in that position.
I'm pretty sure he meant to shoot him.
You think he meant to shoot him?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like, eventually he worked up to, he actually did.
I'm pretty sure I've done that, so, to be quite honest.
And Zach being the older brother in this, actually, Zach is the oldest and has 3 younger brothers, whereas I only have one. I have only younger sisters. So this movie may be more, like, my older brother was very kind to me, so. I really have no complaints. This was not our relationship, which I know is not like a lot of brother relationships growing up.
No, it's a good thing.
But But some of this might have come also from the fact that his father was also a little bit like he would have him fight and like do different things, and it might be a little bit of his father rubbing off on him. At one point, he says his father admits to him that he's flawed and that he's been too tough on him, and then he tells his dad, "I'm just as bad as you," which is like kind of a backhanded compliment or backhanded thing to say.
Like, I'm kind of proud, but also it's not good.
And then he's like, "I'm more like you than I am like her," talking about his mom.
Yeah.
And at one point he calls out his mom and says that like she can't stand up for herself, which is again not necessarily the way you said it was not super kind or helpful.
No.
But there was some element of truth to it.
Yeah.
But it was not still an appropriate thing to say to her.
Yeah. And it's just funny, the juxtaposition of a scene like that, like a kid back talking to his mom pretty horribly, and then just going to like lava and space.
Yeah.
You know? Or dinosaurs.
Yeah, there's a lot of like really personal fights and interaction. And then it's like zooms out 1,000%. Trillion percent.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, what is it? Now what does all of life mean? Like, what, now we're asking huge questions. And then we narrow back down to one specific family and story.
Yeah. What would you say is a summary of this film in one word? And if you can't think of one, I can go first.
You go first.
My word is perspective.
Oh, I knew you were going to say this.
Why?
Because you said it. You said you were going to say this.
Oh, during the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's all about the way that we look at things. I think we can get caught up. There are two sides to look at it. One, we can get caught up in the intimate moments where, right, the things inside of our mind, the things inside of our heart, our relationships between us and our family or the people around us. And we can become tunnel visioned almost with the way that those relationships are going or the things that are happening in our mind and heart. The way that those are going actually determine how we view reality. If our relationship with our brother is going bad, we can view all of reality as bad. We get so tunnel visioned and so like focused in on that, right? On the other side of it, you can look at the cosmos and see all these amazing, beautiful shots, and the dinosaurs too, and think, okay, that means that everything in my life is meaningless. There are other things going on. I'm not tunnel visioned. I'm not visioned at all. I'm just kind of blankly staring at everything and realizing it's just randomness. Now, I would say the perspective thing is there a balance to be found between those two views? Is there a way to not be so hyper-focused to where our reality and the way that we view reality and our emotions in view of reality are based on a very small portion of reality? And then on the other hand of that, not going so far to say that we are just tiny and insignificant. And I would say, yes, of course, there has to be a balance. Just like in most things, there has to be a balance.
Yeah, I think like in our modern age, it's become a huge temptation to emphasize our insignificance, which on its face seems like it's not a horrible thing to do because you're like, okay, yeah, we're humbling ourselves now.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it just leaves room to just neglect human importance whatsoever, and then diminish the value of life and diminish the value of earth and diminish, you start elevating things.
Yeah.
And there could be multiple reasons why people do this. And I don't know that I've even thought through all of the different, but what I do know is that people do that. Mm-hmm. They look at the cosmos, like you're saying, and they like, we're super small. We don't matter. Mm-hmm. There's probably life outside of here that matters more than us, start to make a hierarchy of like, oh, woe is me type, like philosophy. And like, it's interesting because as Christians, you're like, yes, like we are very broken. We're very flawed. Like like in a lot of ways, yes, we are insignificant. But the thing is, we believe that our existence does matter and does have a purpose. Yeah. So, and if we believe that we're created in the image of God, like all of a sudden, like we are definitely not insignificant. We are significant. Yeah. Because there is nothing else created in the image of God.
Yeah, it's both humbling and exalting because we are not created in the image of us. That means we are derivative to some point, right? We are separate beings, but we are derived from God. which means that we have our origination from him. So that's humbling, right? But it's also exalting because it means that when we zoom out 1,000 degrees and see the rest of the cosmos and everything that's happening and the hugeness and vastness of it, and realize that we are the crown of that we are the centerpiece of that, that's exalting. It's glorifying.
And it's not like we're the centerpiece in the sense that the people before Galileo thought, where we're like literally like the universe is orbiting around us. Although, I guess like technically you don't know that's not true. But but I'm not. That's not the argument we're making. We mean like from a spiritual and like from all senses of like, there's a reason that God created all of this vast cosmos that shows his greatness, and that we are such a small part of that to humble us, but to also exalt us, to also like magnify our significance, the fact that there's all this and God still sent his son to our earth to die for us.
Yeah.
Like,
as opposed to the other
as
Earths.
opposed to the rocks on some other planet.
No, I'm just joking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. And the title of this film is The Tree of Life. And of course it takes you back to the origins, right? To the beginning, to where the reason that life is set apart and centralized on this planet is because that's where the covenant was. Mm-hmm. God made the covenant here, and that's where our responsibility comes from. Now, if we don't look through a covenantal framework and our responsibility falling within that, then we look at humanity as almost a collective, as someone who, like this one being almost, like I forget whose theory it was, but this idea of innate knowledge within all humans, which does exist to some extent in nature and genetics, but this innate knowledge of deeper understanding that we can find out together, right? Which I do not believe in. I don't believe in that. But if you don't think of your responsibility as falling strictly within the covenant that God made with Adam, or with man in general, throughout the rest of the covenants, then you start to see yourself as insignificant. You start to see, like you said, maybe there are alien races out there more important to us. Well, no, because if we were the ones who God made the covenant with, then there is a specific purpose for all of this, and we are involved in that purpose. We might not be the highest end of God, but that's okay, and that's probably good. Because if we were the highest end of God, then God would be a being that has the highest end in something dumb and something sinful. And so it is like, again, it's the same. The lesson's the same. It's both humbling and exalting. But it does kind of, this film takes you back to those garden origins, the Garden of Eden origins, to realize, like, at the end of the day, we have some amazing experiences and amazing qualities that God has given us on this earth. But also we have bad relationships with our mom and bad relationships with our dad. And our relationships with our brother can end by death, right? Yeah. So there is brokenness in this world. One of your friends down the road can be burned. And you realize, why would God allow this? And you realize, I keep using the word realize. And you realize, if you look at the bigger picture in the cosmos, there are so many things going on. And that's not supposed to demean us. It means that God has higher purposes, including the small situations. So if God can be in charge of that lava trillions of light years away that explodes, or that star that radiates that light 1,000 light years away, or even Mars that Elon Musk is trying to colonize, if God is in charge of all those things, then even more so, he is in charge of our relationships here. And he has a lot of say in that. And in fact, all say. And so it kind of just is a new perspective on everything, to realize that, yeah, God's purposes are much, much larger than we could even imagine, because we often try to narrow them to our specific storylines and perspectives. But God's purposes aren't just for one individual person. He has purposes for every single human being that's ever existed. Now, some will end in tragedy, and some will end in glorification. But that's another whole other thing. So perspective is my
perspective.
Word. Yeah.
I don't know that I have a word after you said all that. One word that came to mind was love, but that was because of the quote that Mrs. O'Brien has at the end of the movie. That's like, what life is not worth living without love. It's probably not exactly what she said, but
Something.
it was along those lines. And I think, we're talking about this, like, God's love is the reason to be worth to live. So, like, a lot of this is just like journaling people's, like, not journaling, following people's journey along that realization, because that you can't. It is love, but it can't be love. All of the relationships within their family, they loved each other, yes, but they were all frayed, like, not perfect.
Yeah.
Symbols of love, because they were doing things to hurt the other person. They were not following through on their commitments to the people in their life. But that's how all of our relationships with our family and spouses and friends are, because we aren't perfect. So we're not showing perfect love, but God displays perfect love. And so then I think the thing that when you say something like that people struggle with the most, as I said at the beginning, is like, well, if God is this really powerful being who does love us, and he's allowing the suffering, how do I, because now all of a sudden I can assign blame to God for the suffering, because now I believe in there being a God, but I also believe that he is allowing, or in some senses, some people might believe he's causing things to happen. And if he's sovereign, then there's an argument to be made that he is, in some sense, like, again, I keep using the word allowing because it's maybe a bit of a cop-out word if you don't quite know how to describe something. Is to say, well, at the very least, we can agree that he's allowing it to happen because he's sovereign.
Yeah. And of course, we know God did not create evilness or sin.
Yes.
But, he did take away Job's family.
Right.
That was God.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, God allowed the devil to do it. And again,
he allows the devil to exist. Again,
sure.
So you can use the word allow for a lot of things, and you could probably have a whole, like, I don't want to get too hung up on the wording, because I think you could probably do a whole nother podcast about, or a whole episode on the word allow versus all of these other function of things, and we probably wouldn't have all the answers, again, because we struggle at times in our own lives with these same questions that these people are struggling. But what I love about what Malick is doing is that he is. He doesn't get too hung up on those things, because he's allowing the viewer to be like, to enter into the story at where they're at on their journey. He's not necessarily trying to be a knower. He's showing you He's showing you truths, like realities.
Yeah.
Parts of your life. Even with his creation sequence, he leaves it so open-ended, like, as to what is actually happening, because he's not concerned about the details of how creation functioned. Like, people can get into big arguments about whether they believe in creationism versus evolution. This probably leaned a little bit more into evolution, but it was, but I would say it wasn't doing it in a way that was necessarily trying to make like a huge statement that like, this is the way the earth formed. It was more so trying to show that God is a part of all of these. Like, we know dinosaurs existed, like God designed them. We know the cosmos exists, and we know there's like insane, natural wonders that have happened. Like, it's not like, it doesn't get hung up on things that you could get hung up on, and it allows you space to, just enter into and process your thoughts.
That's a great way to put it.
And he doesn't necessarily deliver answers, but he does nudge you in certain directions, I would say.
Definitely. And I would say one of the ways that he nudges us is in the grace versus nature thing, where he is showing that, yes, we live in a world with brokenness, with broken relationships specifically. And the world is kind of like nature. It's cruel. It's ruthless. It's not going to allow us to sin, because sin has natural consequences. When God designed the world in all of reality, he designed it with built-in, pre-coded consequences to sin, right? You do something dumb, there's usually something stupid or something bad that happens to you, right? You touch a stove, you get burnt, and stuff like that. And because of these natural consequences to sin, things get messy. Like their neighbor, their friend who got burnt in the back of his head. That's an example, right? And when things get messy like that, that's the effects of nature. That's the effects of the cruelty of the rules that we have to abide by, the law that hammers us, right? But then there's also grace. There's this beautiful grace that comes in the midst of all these consequences that we deserve by the law. Nature can bog us down, but God gives us freedom through grace, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we still need the nature. We still need the law. We still need that thing to give us consequences for our sin, or we wouldn't stop sinning. We need something to nudge us in that direction. And I think the mother and the father exemplify that very well, because you can see that the mother's running around with her sons, giving them freedom to enjoy life, to have fun. But then when the father's away,
mm-hmm.
the son gets disrespectful. And then the mom smiles when the father comes back and shuts up his son. So, of course, this is the worst marriage you could possibly see. Complete opposite.
You might actually be able to see worse, which is kind of sad.
I'm just saying, like,
but
when it comes to oneness, they are 0%. And then there's no balance to be made. But it also shows, like, those are the two ways. There is grace and there is nature. Yes, you need both. It would be better with, in the context of relationships, it would be better if there were oneness in the marriage so that there would be a balance between the two and both would be there and in harmony with one another. But often they clash against one another. Often we don't see the relationship between grace and nature that we need to see, because God perfectly balances it. He punishes us. He gives us the rod when we need it because he loves us, right? But then he also gives us grace because he loves us. Both of them are out of love. And we see in the brokenness of this world, we see the relationship between the father and the mother as the relationship between grace and nature. And we don't see the harmony between them, which is why we start asking questions like, why would God do this? If we're only looking at God's nature side, why would God do this? Why would God do that? Why would he allow that child to burn?
We are looking at a very one-sided. I definitely agree with that.
But then if we look at the grace, we could even say, God, why aren't you killing my dad? Why aren't you? I wish you would just kill him right now.
Because we switch very easily to being like, why isn't all grace allowed, to being like, why isn't God? We flip the coin on God very quickly.
Exactly.
To be like, why isn't he punishing evil?
But I think that's a point that one of the points Malick is trying to make. And I haven't found this. I haven't looked up anything, so I'm not cheating. I hope I'm not stealing anybody's idea.
I'm sure Malick did not comment on anything regarding what he was thinking. Not. So you are probably not.
Maybe New Rock Stars did, though. I don't know.
The only thing you could be copying is somebody's essay that they made about what Tree of Life meant.
I'm kind of forming this as I go as well. The broken relationship between the mom and the dad is how we view grace and nature. And it shouldn't be. We should see them having a harmony between them. And we should see grace and nature as balanced. And when we lean on one side more than the other, bad things happen. So there is a balance between them. We either wish our dad to be dead or we wish our friends to not be hurt. But there's a balance in the middle because God has higher purposes. And God is the God who gives and he takes away. He chose to allow those things to happen to Job. He chose for those things to happen to RL, not RM.
Yeah, RL.
RL.
That's a very odd name.
Whatever, yeah.
Sounds like a Texas
the 50s,
name for some
whatever.
reason.
And that's because God's purposes are higher. And that's why you get all those cosmos shots. So, perspective.
Yes. So, yeah. I don't think I could really summarize the themes too much better. I think you could really go on and on too. Like if you break down like some of the subtle aspects of the movie, like you could pull into a lot of themes, but the clear ones are, I think, the ones that we addressed. But sure. the thing that's beautiful about the movie is the obvious clear themes that are pointed out are like so profound and true to us that, again, we just spent 30 to 40 minutes talking about them, and we probably only scratched the surface. But also maybe you don't have to go too far beyond the surface, because a lot of times the truths that God presents to the world are not complex. Like, they're simple truths.
God gives us the most profound wisdom in Happy Meals.
Yeah,
it's pretty common.
And very and something that's always fascinated me about philosophy, the general study, is how complex it is. But then you start to realize that maybe the complexity is just creating layers and layers and puzzles and maps and roads that just circle around all of the issues that really have a simple answer.
What I've always found interesting, Ben, is when these great philosophers and mathematicians and physicists are trying to solve a problem, it always goes back to either 0 or 1 or something like that, you know? And they have to do all this work around and running around in loops and circles and triangles and trigonometry to get back to the simplest of answers, which is usually a unit number. Now, I'll say this. The complexity that comes with philosophy, and you said this once, philosophy is just finding new ways to ask complicated questions. And that's all it is. It's setting up, could this framework happen? And we're going to make it extremely complicated. And I often think like the most extremely complicated frameworks are often wrong because they don't fit. And God is a God of order.
Yeah, and not only they don't fit, and you've also, if you make the framework complicated, you give more opportunities for there to be errors within the framework,
which just makes more papers to write.
Yeah, and then you have to fix those errors, and it's and in a lot of ways you can start looking at it like it's a math equation too. Like you're like trying to get to this answer, and you're doing it through logical arguments and all of these different things, which is not as clear as math.
And there can be genuine pursuit,
right?
But often people
there could be brilliance within the pursuit.
But there can, I think, when you abandon truth or the foundations of truth, or if you're intellectually dishonest, then oftentimes you'll go in directions that will cause you to believe things that aren't true.
Right. Yeah. Or cause you to believe that there is no truth.
Like Kant.
Which is then then you have to question your framework all over again.
Yeah.
But again, hopefully maybe at some point we'll do a philosophy vault. I would love that, but
lots of ambition over here.
But we have lots of ambition. We have too much ambition and not enough time. And you learn in this movie you're not going to have time to read everything you want to read, and sometimes it's not even important. Like the pursuits that you have and you've built up in your mind, just like Mr. O'Brien with his inventions in business, those aren't the things that are going to satisfy you. And again, same lesson in lots of movies. Like these things aren't going to satisfy you, but we have to hear them over and over and over again because we don't believe them a lot of the time. We believe our own hearts that the things that our designs will make us happy, and we have to keep reminding ourselves that that's not true.
You know what we should be reminded of? That we need car insurance,
that's true.
Business insurance, and home insurance.
Because how many fires and tragedies did we see in this movie?
Oh, and at least two.
At least two. And you need now the kid who died, sadly. RL. He might not have left anyone behind, so he may have not found it practical to have life insurance. But you, listener, probably do have family. And
even if you don't, though, you should still get insurance,
should still consider, right? And you definitely need car insurance because you legally have to have car insurance.
Yeah.
Now, as our friend Ben O'Shea was saying on A Hidden Life, even if you already have car insurance, Hedman Anglin Agency is an independent insurer. They can shop your insurance, find you a better rate. There's things that affect your rate, your age, your driving record, and sometimes it's just as simple as a new company.
Yeah. So
he saved a lot of money with Hedman Anglin. They can't necessarily guarantee, but in a lot of cases, they can find a better insurance than the one you currently have.
Definitely.
So insurance can be frustrating, but it's necessary to have.
And they have a free online tool.
And they do have, for life insurance, there's a free online tool. And life insurance, as I learned, there's a lot of things to think about. Like, do you want a full life or group or term? And they can answer those questions. And
I will need to know what that means, so I'll be asking them that.
Maybe not. I think group term might be one word. I don't know. But again, like I said, I can explain it to you because you need the experts at Hedman Anglin to explain it to you. So their number is 614-486-7300. That's 614-486-7300. And their website is, let me not say it. It's very simple, HedmanAnglinAgency.com. How could I mess that up?
I don't know.
And the reason I point out the website, not just the phone number, is that that's where the life insurance tool is. Mm-hmm. And you may have some questions still after using the life insurance tool, and they can answer those when you give them a call, but it'll give you at least an idea of what the price is going to be.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, especially for our younger listeners, if you get life insurance when you're younger, you can lock into a rate that's very affordable because you're at the peak of your health a lot of times when you're young.
Yeah.
So lock into something that makes sense for you.
So lock in. That's your advice.
Yeah,
Lock in.
that's my advice. Lock in. That's what I did actually just a couple weeks ago with the tool, and I liked it a lot.
And the other thing about it is, if you don't want to listen to robots all day. I called Walmart the other day. I had to listen to 3 different robots telling me
I had this same issue with a pharmaceutical company I was calling.
that you were investing in.
Not that I
you're
was
big
investing.
pharma?
Yeah, huge into big pharma.
Yeah. Well, if you don't want to talk to robots like Ben and his big pharma pursuits, then call Hedman England Agency. A real person will answer. Not only that, but a real person that's a real person, if you know what I mean. A real one.
A real one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
That's all I have to say as well.
So, yeah, give him a call or else.
Do it.
Yep.
There's a lot of technical stuff to talk about this movie. I'm super excited. I was reading through some stuff, and there's a lot of like just crazy things about this movie.
Enlighten me.
If you've listened to a podcast about Tree of Life already, none of this may be mind-blowing to you, but to me, some of this was awesome. So, Terrence Malick in his 20-year gap, he is initially going to make this movie called Q.
Mm-hmm.
And he just randomly stopped working on it. Because I think Paramount or Universal or one of those companies had signed on to that they were going to do this. He just gave up on it. That's why they were so nervous in the Thin Red Line that he was going to just drop out.
He probably could have.
Q, he did. He showed that he is willing to walk away, which is honestly probably served him well in his career because people they realize the gravity of working with him.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, okay, we've got to hope that he's serious, and we have to try our best to keep him being serious. So he's maybe a little bit savvy in that regard. But I think maybe the Q idea just didn't work out in his head, and he had issues with it. But I guess this beginning of the world sequence kind of came out of that idea of Q. There's something about the Middle East and World War I in Q, so I don't know how all of that tied together.
Okay.
But he eventually was working with River Road Entertainment and Bill Pollard, and he pitched the I started mixing words. The Tree of Life.
What'd you say at first?
I was gonna say the Green Red Line or something it's like
the
mixing,
Christmas line, huh?
I don't even know.
Oh, the rain outside.
So River Road was on in the first place, and then they brought on Plan B, who is Brad Pitt's production company, right? You remember when I said in the middle of watching the movie, I wonder if Brad Pitt's production company was involved. They were involved. So they were the second financiers of the movie. And I guess it wasn't until later on that there was a lightning strike
that was pretty loud
right next to our house.
Nice.
I'm glad the computer didn't turn off and delete this.
Yeah, for sure. So do you think that's how he got his part in the film?
I think that's how it came to fruition. Well, it turns out that Heath Ledger was initially supposed to play the part of Mr. O'Brien.
Yeah.
And then he was sick, so he dropped out, and then he tragically passed a month later.
Oh, he passed a month after that?
Yeah, so which is definitely pretty dark and sadly fits with some of the themes of the movie. Yeah,
definitely.
In a really kind of morbid, real life way. But
that would have been a very different film.
Yes, it would have been a very different film. It would have been interesting to see. But I think Pitt really fits the part well.
I wanted to say that. I think you said, do you think this is his best performance?
Not looking through all of his movies that he's done that I've watched, but I can say with confidence that while it might not be my favorite of his performances, because he's certainly more charismatic in other movies, it's maybe his best work of pure acting.
I was about to say, I didn't notice Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
All I saw was a Texas father.
Which is a huge thing with Brad Pitt and would make it hard for him to be a character actor because people talk about character actors who are in action stars or leading men bodies. And Brad Pitt plays really good characters
Mm-hmm.
in the movies he's in. But a lot of times you're distracted by the fact that it's Brad Pitt.
Yep.
And he is conventionally a very attractive guy.
I think you said he's got it all. He's attractive and he can act.
Yeah, and he's aged super well.
Yeah.
We were talking about Leo versus Brad Pitt, and I know Leo still has like a lot of sway and things, but personally, I think Brad Pitt has aged a lot better.
Yeah.
And I heard someone talk on another podcast about how he's kind of gone he's kind of taken a Paul Newman route. I think this is the big picture point of this out there. I was like, that's a
How
like,
so? Explain.
Like he's now willing to take more like side roles, or like he's the mentor type roles. Like and he had his moment where he was like the leading guy, and he was, people would go to his movies to watch him specifically, and now he's with more of this production and also side character. I'm sure he's still playing the lead in some movies, but
Refer back to our Paul Newman arc.
Yeah, interesting observation that he could be have a similar career to an actor who's close to the movie vault, at least in terms of that we focused on him
in our hearts.
Interesting. The editing was fascinating to me. It's not often we talk about editing on the movie vault, so I guess Malick used very unconventional ways to edit this movie. Essentially, they had shot a bunch of stuff. So this is a very abstract story, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, did he have this like all planned out that this is going to be how it was? I think he had some direction for the movie, but a lot of it, I think, came to him in the editing process.
Yeah.
So he had people cut stuff all different ways, leave dialogue in, take dialogue out, edit these things together. And apparently he was open to like ideas from anyone. So he had students from USC and University of Texas School of Film edit stuff together, and some of these students stayed on for the entire project because he liked their ideas.
Imagine having that on your filmography.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. And it's also interesting because it shows you that, like, while we love Auteur theory and we're going to give Terrence Malick all the credit, like, without this huge team of people who had creative ideas, who individually, in a lot of ways, he's kind of like the conductor of a group of people who are taking stuff that, Malick and it's not Fisk. Jack Fisk didn't shoot this. Emmanuel Lubezki, who he shot The New World with, which was, I think, his next movie after The Thin Red Line. They had like taken all of the footage, but it still took this team of people, these editors, to like make this into what it is.
Do you think Malick evolved in the last 20 years?
It sounds like he was a lot more fun to work with on this movie.
Because
he sounded very open-minded. Maybe this is different from acting to editing, but he was also not. I mean, the acting, from an acting perspective, this wasn't a grueling film. It's not as grounded. It's not like, there were certain aspects of Thin Red Line that lended themselves to being particularly hard.
That's fair.
And hard to fit with Malick's style, like
That's
what
fair.
Malick demands of you.
A war movie from Malick's perspective, to be able to have a film that's about war and also visually storytelling, that's a hard combination to have. Whereas nature is so easy to tell stories through visuals. So,
yeah, and then when it comes to the visual effects, naturally Malick, not ahead of his time, but he didn't like CGI, which I could have predicted from 1,000 miles away. But the problem is, like, we joked that I made a joke that Terrence Malick went back to the start of the universe to film this, but that's not what happened. He had to come up with a way to do this stuff, and he loves natural light and all of these things, but it's just impossible to get the takes that he wanted. Galaxies away, yeah, with natural light and all of this. He's asking the impossible. So he approached Douglas Trumbull, who was a famous special effects supervisor, and Malick and him had previously been friends. And then Trumbull said, well, why don't we, try to do this the way that 2001: A Space Odyssey did. So they used chemicals, paints, fluorescent dyes, smokes, liquids, flares, spin discs, fluid dynamics, lighting, high-speed photography. This is like a quote, splicing up a quote from Trumbull himself. And he said, it was a freewheeling opportunity to explore something I have found extraordinarily hard to get in the movie business. Terry didn't have any preconceived notions of what something should look like. We did things like pour milk through a funnel into a narrow trough and shoot it with a high-speed camera and folding lens, lighting it carefully and using a frame rate that would give the right kind of flow characteristics to look cosmic, galactic, huge, and epic. So this was like a crazy, like super innovative and a process that honestly, it's sad that more people didn't take a look at this film and be like, wow, what possibilities do we have? Because they're using technology like these cameras with high frame rates, things that they didn't necessarily have during 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
But they're still going back to practical effects to do it.
Isn't
and
it
I
crazy?
love that amalgamation of like,
yeah. Isn't it crazy how Marvel will spend $200 million, whatever, on CGI, when this looks better and probably costs like $100,000?
yeah.
I mean, how much did this film cost? $20 million?
$30 million.
$30 million, and it made 60.
Yeah, and that's like a quarter of a CGI budget for a Marvel movie, and it looks 10 times.
I wonder if Brad Pitt's salary was
20
in there
times
too.
better. Yeah, maybe. Although since he was part of production, maybe felt like part of his income, like budget came from.
Because we
being in the
know
production company.
that people are willing to work with Malick for free.
Right.
So I mean, that's just how legendary this guy is.
Yeah. And while it may not be, and again, he did his thing with the cast where we know Jessica Chastain and we know Brad Pitt, but the kids were all just normal kids that this is the only movie they've ever been in their life. They're not child actors. Malick takes them, and they all did a pretty good job.
They did great.
But I think it goes to show you, like, with these roles, and he didn't ask a lot of them to do a lot in terms of dialogue necessarily. But, I mean, they did, a lot of narration and different things. And
yeah. What's the actor for Jack? The actor for Jack did pretty good. I think he was able to express his emotions and yell at his parents pretty well. Pretty similarly to how I used to do it. So that's why it kind of hit
I forget
home.
what his name is.
I wonder if he's...
It's Hunter McCracken.
Okay.
There's lots of Jack. There's like 4 different actors for Jack.
Yeah, that's right.
And then RL is Laramie Epler. And then there's a variety of other kids, none of which were like, they were all like recruited from schools.
Yeah.
Like Malick would just
we
go
made
to
the joke
school.
that Malick just shows that, all right, guys, Terrence Malick is coming today. It's a special day. Play on the playground, but do your best, Go down
yeah, it's
the
like
slide.
he's watching you play on the playground to see how your like acting ability is. Because there are scenes in this movie that are, him going to the playground.
He could have theoretically asked, like, which is your most disrespectful kid? And I'll take him.
So,
that's what I would do.
Critics naturally love this movie. It's almost like it was like a fever dream for critics to get something like this.
Yeah.
It won the Palme d'Or, as we said, and Roger Ebert gave it 4 out of 4.
Wow.
He said, Tree of Life is a film of vast ambition and deep humility, attempting no less than to encompass all of existence and view it through the prism of a few, I don't even know this word, infinitesimal lives. Infinitesimal lives.
You know that word.
Maybe I've never said it out loud.
Small.
The only other film I've seen with the boldness of vision is Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it lacked Malick's fierce why can I not pronounce these words tonight? Evocation. I know this word.
Let me read it. Hold on.
Read this word.
Evocation
of human feeling.
Evocation.
Yeah, something like
evoking.
That. He's evoking human feeling.
Yeah.
There were once several directors who yearned to make no less than a masterpiece, but now there are only a few. Malick has stayed true to that hope ever since his first feature in 1973.
Yes, Badlands.
So this is calling out the modern film world, which is to say directors maybe are a little too content to make something that's pretty good. And they don't shoot for that, magnum opus movie enough. Which I think is an interesting... I mean, that's a whole discussion you can have in its own, because I think you could think of a lot of directors who have lots of very good, solid movies, and they need to have those movies. There's not an argument against them making those movies. It's the fact that at some point they need to shoot for the one that's like, this is going to be the great. And that is the difference between a filmmaker who will be considered to be very good and one who will be remembered. Because Bergman had The Seventh Seal and Persona, and Tarkovsky had Stalker and Mir, and they had other movies, and a lot of those movies were highly rated as well. Fellini had 8.5. Scorsese has Goodfellas. Like, you got to have your one. But I mean, what he's asking of is a pretty high call here to directors too, because even with something like Goodfellas, you're like, that's still kind of like grounded in something. Like, this shoots to transcend beyond, like, it's a very like spiritual, like something that's like, we're trying to understand human knowledge and experience, and I think he described it very well as being like, it's through a prism of a couple people's lives, but we're also moving it way back. And maybe there's only a few people who have the mind to even be able to attempt to do something like that.
That's true. It's for very few specific directors. I would also say that it seems like, maybe besides Badlands, at least in the arc that we've done with these 5 films, it seems like Terrence Malick is trying to make every film his magnum opus. That's why he spends so much time going between his films to get these films correct. He will spend so much time to make each and every one his greatest film in his eyes. And that's dedication that many directors don't have. And a lot of directors that get stuck in these contracts for either financial gain or for just going up in the career don't get the luxury to do that. And they kind of taint their filmography with mediocre films or even good films.
Yeah, and it's not to say that, it's definitely not easy to do the career that Malick did, because it might not have worked out.
No.
Like, he pushed the limit of his own reputation to even, like, had the Thin Red Line fell through, would he have even gotten other opportunities to make movies? It's hard to say. But he was so steadfast in his belief in his vision, and that is the only reason that he was also able to make these movies. Because most executives are always going to operate out of fear, which is not going to lead to the Tree of Life being made. Most people probably would never have thought that this could have been a profitable movie, and it couldn't have been a profitable movie if it was Malick's first. I don't think. So that's the other thing. You have to build a reputation sometimes to be able to pull off something like this. You can't necessarily start with the most ambitious project, because you just aren't going to be able to have the resources to do it well. So there's a lot to be learned through Malick's career, but it's also not necessarily something that you can or even should try to emulate, because it does take a high degree of risk.
But he did it. That's the crazy thing.
Interestingly enough, another director that we love on the Movie Vault, David Lynch, did not like this movie.
Really?
He said it was not his cup of tea.
Well, it's because it was about truth.
And he said that and again, it could be very true, because he said he felt like much of the film just evaporates before your eyes, which I'm like, doesn't seem like a great criticism to me, because that is not how I felt at all. I felt like there was a lot of images that stuck in my head with this. So again, I think, like a true philosophical difference between the directors and religious and spiritual difference exists between the directors that makes them kind of like, I mean, Malick never says anything, but would Malick like any of Lynch's movies? I'm not sure. He may not.
I think he'd like Inland Empire.
I think he would appreciate them from certain standpoints, but they're definitely not like his movies.
No, they're very different movies.
Of course, a big criticism of Malick, or any director who's wins the Palme d'Or, is that it was very self-absorbed, achingly slow, buckling under the weight of swooning poetry. To those people, I would say, I don't
find a new hobby.
I don't like people using self-absorption as an argument for why something is bad.
Yeah, find a new hobby. You know what world you're in.
Because I think it's not to say that self-absorption isn't possible in art, but the point of art and the point that there's people who create art is that it's their specific vision that they're creating that somebody else couldn't create.
Yeah.
So all art is self-absorbed, right? There's sort of a selfish element to art where it's like, I think my thing that I made is profound, and I'm releasing it to the world, and you're releasing it to criticism. But then why do some things get labeled as self-absorbed and other things not, if all of art is kind of like otherwise, like if something is not self-absorbed, it might also be not original.
Sure.
So again,
I think you're right.
It's maybe maybe you could come up with a legitimate like argument that a piece of art is self-absorbed. I just don't think that most of the people who did that with this movie probably did the work to prove that was actually an issue with the movie. It was more so they didn't like how slow it was, and they just used self-absorbed as a buzzword.
Yeah, it's better because it's self-absorbed. I agree with you. I mean, we wouldn't have depth in those story arcs if it weren't self-absorbed.
Right.
He knew that because of his experiences.
And to some degree, when you read about the movie, it's not as self-absorbed as you think, because he's still pulling on so many ideas that he got from other people.
Like the Bible.
The Bible being one of them, source of inspiration. And then, like I said, the people that he worked with in order to actually be able to accomplish Douglas Trumbull, it's like, he's not just an insignificant part of this movie. Like, Malick would not have been able to shoot 30 to 40 minutes of scenes like he did without this guy. Yeah. So to some extent, it just shows that like the credits are a lot more important than we oftentimes realize. Yeah. Because there's not like, movies take so many people, and you have to attach one name for marketing, and because there is one like we said, we love our tour theory, but because it makes things simple too. Because you can just say it's Malick, but Malick doesn't exist without this entire team of people. Yeah. So how is that self-absorbed?
But it's and part of that is like, Malick is the only consistency between most of his films. He changed up from Fisk to this other guy.
Right. Yeah.
He changes the actors frequently, so I think
he still establishes the vision. Like, you need a leader, just like with a company or a business or anything like that.
And he's got to go down with the ship when it happens.
Right. And he has had movies that haven't been as universally praised as this one. It's not to say that he's never made a bad movie, although I haven't watched. I'm guessing if I watched his other movies, I wouldn't think any of his movies are bad.
Sure.
I would like some more than others, but I probably wouldn't think any of them were bad.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
I will say the dinosaurs in this film were a little bit much for me.
Yeah. That might be where you got put. What about the scene where the dinosaur spares the other one? Was that profound to you or no?
I mean,
was that like showing grace?
I don't know. I don't. That's the thing. I just don't know.
So this was nominated for an Academy Award. It did not win.
You don't need an Academy Award if you win the.
But I think in our eyes, if you win the Palme d'Or, like let's say I made a movie, if I had the choice to win the Palme d'Or or the Academy Award for Best Picture, I would pick the Palme d'Or.
Yeah, I mean,
it feels like it means
international.
It feels like it means more.
Yeah,
because
it's in French.
It's international. It feels like the audience that you're going against is like stricter, and it's less about like the Academy Awards is so much about campaigning, which is so
it's American.
Yeah, which is an American way to do awards. Like, we're coming up on our award season. It really sounds like people are talking about it's coming down to The Brutalist and this movie Emilia Perez that nobody liked, but somehow is nominated and is in the running, which is bizarre. You're like, a movie that has not great ratings, but somehow it's like in the running for Best Movie. Yeah. And Dune Part 2 is like nowhere to be found. It's like, I don't know.
There was an actor from Thin Red Line that plays the Brutalist guy, right?
Yeah, Adrian Brody. Yeah. And The Brutalist is like, again, I have not seen it, so I'm not going to comment on it, but it's another movie that I know it was very long. It had an intermission, so some people might look at that as being purposefully like long and drawn out for the sake of, well, people who vote for awards like will be able to tell this is an artistic movie. I would like to think that hopefully it's not. That's not the reason the movie's that long. That it's actually like had that much content in the movie that it deserved to be, have a long run time.
It depends.
So, Um, like I said, when I said all that about the self-absorbed argument, it was because I believe in Malick.
Yeah.
It's not because I don't think people can be self-absorbed in their art.
And Malick is someone to be to some extent is someone to be believed in, because a lot of people want to attach themselves to Malick's projects because his vision is so clear, so him. That's so stupid. Like, that's so him. But like with Malick, you see a Malick film and you're like, oh, this long drawn out visually storytelling film is so Malick. And that's been consistent in his last 4 films that we've watched. And I don't know. I'm going to miss it, Ben. I think going through this arc has taught me that some films just require so much intellectual thought and are tiring. And it was probably like the worst time in my life that I could have picked.
To watch.
Yeah. Like, I'm getting married. I'm starting med school, stuff like that. And we chose to go through the Terrence Malick series. But to be fair, we thought that we would be able to get it done before the wedding. But now we're a month away from the wedding, and it's or a month after the wedding.
But you know what? I don't regret it being drawn out.
I don't either. I think it was good to be able to kind of chew on these films for a while.
Right. I sat on, my maybe only regret in the entire series is that I didn't rewatch. I was too lazy to rewatch The Thin Red Line before the second, because maybe sometimes when you have too much space between a movie, you start to forget things. I did my best. Hopefully I still contributed a good amount to that podcast.
No, that was good.
But you also do, sometimes when you have a couple months to sit on a movie, you develop, like, your recency bias fades. You develop more of a, like, concise.
Yeah.
Even though you haven't seen it as recently, your feelings are more settled.
Yeah.
So that is kind of nice. I was just looking at what Tree of Life won against. Apparently, there's tons of movies that are nominated for
Drive.
Yeah, but Drive was one of them. The Artist was the one that won the Academy Award that year. The Artist is like an okay movie, but I would not put it. I could go on a little mini rant about The Artist.
I can tell by your little sigh there.
The Artist is a delightful movie to watch. Okay, it's a fun movie, but it is extremely derivative in the Hollywood sense, because it's a movie about silent movies becoming talking movies, which is like, okay, like, that's great, but we already had, Sunset Boulevard, and like, we're 100 years past almost that happening and affecting Hollywood, and we're still making movies and giving those movies awards. I'm not saying like we shouldn't make movies about that. What I'm saying is, like, the movie Over Tree of Life, that was like a profound movie that had never been, like, nothing like it had ever been made. Like, yeah, like I just said Sunset Boulevard, because that is a movie that's about exactly the same things The Artist is about. Yeah. So, and Sunset Boulevard is a fantastic movie. So again,
go listen to that episode.
Lars von Trier's Melancholia. This is an interesting movie. A bunch of European and Asian cinema. Once Upon a Time in Australia, assuming it's an Australian movie. Skin I Live In. I've heard of that. But yeah, Tree of Life, clearly the best. Not the highest rated on IMDb of these movies. But that's because IMDb is full of the cheapie. No, I'm just kidding. I never want to. I say that in jest, because it's good to have it's good to like have critics, but also like you should never look down upon people. I think when it comes to art,
because people are just interested.
People are interested in different things, and like there's reasons that movies don't all have to be the Tree of Life.
Listen to our movie. This was in the last episode talking about.
Yeah, the last half of the episode is really about how movie experiences and watching can be different, and how you don't have to watch like Terrence Malick necessarily to like enjoy movies.
But you should, and you could.
And we're trying to help lead you along, but we're also going to review at least one movie. Can't even promise you that, because we're jumping into another series that'll be fun for us, and it'll be another lead people into a new direction type of arc.
We'll find out.
All right, Zach, you ready to close the vault?
You got any movie highlights?
Oh, I do.
I know mine. I just have one.
Okay, go ahead.
I watched The Crucible with Daniel Day-Lewis. It was pretty fun.
Fun?
Not
okay.
really. No, it
Crucible
was pretty
fun.
It was pretty dark. I think the strengths of it where it's just the intellectual arguments that were being made, the questions about God and theology and, who to trust. And there was like a lot of drama. It was really cool, like a chess match almost. The faults of it were just technical aspects. Cinematography wasn't great. There could have been a little bit better dialogue. But the acting was great. So, I gave it 3.5 stars, I think. So, what about
All right. I've watched a few movies. So I think I watched this after, Genre Wars, The Rules of the Game. I loved, I had to watch a genre noir movie for a movie class. I forget the name of the movie though, blanking on it. But that movie was very good. And so The Rules of the Game was his, I want films directed by Jean Renoir. The movie I had to watch was The Grand Illusion, which is a great, probably like if you want to get introduced to Renoir, you should watch Grand Illusion because I think it's a little bit more translatable. I loved Rules of the Game. I thought it was cool, but I did think that it was a little over my head in terms of like the social commentary because it seems very heavily about France. In the 1930s, which I'm not very knowledgeable about. So I think there's a lot of stuff that I missed that could be cool or would be cool, but I could appreciate the fact.
I wish I knew that.
Yeah, I wish I knew, but like, and maybe parts that are supposed to be comedic that are joke. It's kind of like in Parasite, how there were like specific jokes that would like go over some English viewers' heads because you just don't know the culture. Yeah. So that's just a natural thing that can happen with if you watch foreign cinema, but I could still appreciate the movie as a whole and liked it a lot. I watched Spirited Away, first Studio Ghibli movie I've ever watched. I was blown away. Socks were blown off. It was lived up to every bit of the hype. Didn't quite give it 5 stars off initial viewing, but I definitely think it could work its way up there. Okay. Because I think I just didn't even know how to take in what I had just watched. Yep. It is that different of an experience from anything you'll ever watch. Yeah. And I did cheat a little bit. I did watch the English dub version. Then I watched David Cronenberg's Shivers, which is not the best Cronenberg movie, but again, it's a very early one. It's right after Rabid.
It's no Videodrome.
But it touches on a lot of Cronenbergian things, which and I do love Cronenberg. I think like he's the king of body horror. He is gory, but he's also like it feels like it's gore and violence and all this stuff with a sense of purpose. Sure. Like it's not like we're just doing a slasher. It's like we're questioning technology and how it affects and social relationships and things while we're doing all the gore and crazy.
It's not a Terrifier. It's not a Saw.
Yeah, like we're putting some thought into some of this stuff. So I think that's why I tend to like Cronenberg better than some of the other stuff, even though I love a good like slasher and all of that every once in a while.
I'm excited for your next one.
Then I watched Alimony Madness, which is a 1933 movie that I was the 20th person on Letterboxd to have watched because I found it on this list that I'd seen Letterboxd advertised somewhere with Tubi, that they had this list that was like movies on Tubi that are under 5,000 views on Letterboxd. So I was like, and this appeals to me because I want to be unique. So my way to be unique is to like, watch, like obviously if it's obscure, nobody's watched it, it must be a good movie. No, this movie was not that good. It was like, I rated it 2 stars. I mean, it held my interest for an hour. So it wasn't less than 2 stars. Because I think if a movie can like hold your interest without it being like painful to get through and you're like literally like drudging through the trenches to get through it. Like it wasn't like that. It also wasn't super long. But like it's literally just a story about things that like happen and there's not like that much compelling about the story itself. Like there's a couple fighting and then they get a divorce and then this happens and that happens and there's alimony
madness.
It's alimony madness. It is what the title says. Because they demand high alimony and the guy's like, whatever, I'll do whatever. But he has to there's all this stuff about how he has to get like caught cheating because that's the only way they were allowed to get a divorce. was on grounds of infidelity. So they like set up, and
What a weird.
then he
movie.
like ended up with the girl that they set up. He didn't actually commit infidelity. He just set it up like it looked like he was.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ends up getting together with that girl. They have a baby, and I think someone gets shot in the end. And at the end, I was like, I don't even care if they got shot or I was like, should I rewind and see whether I lost track of what was happening? Nah, I don't care.
That's funny.
It's funny. Maybe we'll get probably not the like if I'm like viewing every time is limited and like I probably shouldn't spend that much time on that list because I'm probably not going to find that many movies that are worth watching. But it is fun to be like, oh yeah, I was the 20th person.
Yeah.
And at Letterboxd, it feels like you're the 20th person in the world to watch the movie, but
definitely not.
Definitely not. The sound quality is also so bad because however they restored this movie, like dug it up from some tape underground, like, and restore. I'm sure that's what happened. Like, and then somehow it wound up on like Tubi's like the service where it's like nobody else will take it, and they're like, we'll take it.
Yeah. Yep.
So it is kind of awesome though if you like free, like you can find some like pretty good, like relatively obscure stuff on Tubi. So it's a good resource to have.
Yeah.
Same with Canopy. But if for higher brow stuff, you can find
art.
And then lower brow stuff you can find on Tubi.
Higher art.
Anyway,
we use hierarchies in art.
Yeah, we love hierarchies here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, another longer one, but
what
it's
we
Malick.
An hour 27. Yeah. Well, final thoughts on Malick. I think my favorite Malick film is Days of Heaven.
Okay.
And then I would put this,
mm-hmm.
and then I would say, then I would say, okay, Days of Heaven, Thin Red Line, Tree of Life, Badlands, A Hidden Life.
Interesting.
It feels horrible to put A Hidden Life as number 5, but that's where I'm at.
I have Thin Red Line. Oh, this is tough. This is really tough. I think I'd also go Days of Heaven second.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would go Tree of Life third.
Okay.
So basically, I think I would do everything the same. I would just flip Thin Red Line being my favorite.
Okay.
And Days of Heaven being my second favorite.
Okay, so 1 and 2 are flipped.
Yeah,
so,
I think I could see an argument for A Hidden Life over Badlands, but Badlands is such a like fun Malick movie,
mm-hmm.
and Hidden Life is great. It has a lot of great themes, but of all the movies, it seems like the most work to get through, and the one I'd be least likely to rewatch.
Yeah.
Although I could make that argument about Tree of Life a little bit.
Yeah. I've seen A Hidden Life twice. The second time was better.
Second time was better.
But I could also see myself flipping A Hidden Life in Badlands.
Yeah.
But for now, Badlands is on top.
Yep.
So anyway, go check out all those films. Maybe we'll do another Malick film in the future.
Not
anytime soon.
Yeah, we'll leave him away for maybe he'll fit into some other random arc at some point.
Yeah, long movies.
When we do Night of Cups.
Yeah, whatever. Movies about knights
To
of
the
cups.
Wonder or whatever.
Yep. So, with that, do you have any final thoughts, Ben?
No, Malick is 100% worth your time. If you don't believe that after 5 episodes, then
this is what I'll say.
I don't know what to tell you.
If you have a free 3 hours on your hands, it's a Friday night, the kids are in bed, the wife is at a conference in New Jersey for something, and you got a free 3 hours, and you're like, I don't know what to do with this 3 hours. We'll go spend the first 10 minutes making some popcorn, hot chocolate, maybe a little bit of pretzel bites.
Maybe a coffee.
Yeah, coffee. And then sit down. You got, 2 hours and 40 minutes left. Start the Malick movie right away because you won't be able to finish it if
you waste any more time.
So, yeah. And then you'll be in bed by 10. Having watched a Malick movie, having been able to contemplate about it. You can dream about it. Wake up, think that you're about to be executed by the Nazis, and call it a night. So, with that, let's close the vault.
All right.